I originally wanted to film my summer reading wrap-up today, but suddenly the weather just dropped to like 20 degrees Celsius overnight, and it's looking rainy and gloomy here in Austria, so it's the perfect ambiance to talk about my fall TBR. Hi, if you have made it to this tiny corner of YouTube, welcome, I'm happy to have you here. My name is Andi, I'm a chaotic reader, and today I will attempt to put together a little TBR for autumn. Knowing myself, I will probably get to like 50% of these books, and the rest of the time I will just read impulsively based on my mood. Not gonna lie, I'm not an autumn girly. I enjoy spring the most, so the weather getting gloomy and rainy here in Austria usually makes me gloomy as well. However, I try to offset the effect by cozying up under a blanket with a book and some nice tea. I don't necessarily read according to the season, but I have a couple of books that I specifically kept for this time of the year. One day last week I was browsing my Storygraph data and realized that I own around 100 books currently here in our home in Vienna and on my Kindle, which means not counting all the books I still have in my parents' home back in Hungary. And around 40% of them is still unread. So during autumn I will look to bring this statistic down a little bit and not indulge too much in my other favorite hobby after book reading, which is book buying. Therefore, most of my autumn TBR picks are books I already own or that I pre-ordered in the case of new releases. I will start with an obvious one. I already pre-ordered the Waterstone Special Edition for Acres for True Love, the third part of the Once Upon a Broken Heart series by Stephanie Garber. This word has me by the heart, and I cannot wait to read what happens with Eva, Jax and Apollo next. The author hinted on her Instagram that in Acres for True Love there will be multiple POVs, so that has me extra hyped as well. So far we followed the main character, Evangeline Fox, who is a hopeless believer of true love, make a deal with the Prince of Hearts, Jax, and the plot revolves basically around all the consequences of this deal, not only on Eva's life, but also the people around her and their world in general. There are fairy tale elements, there are vampires, there are curses, heart-achingly tender moments, and the plot twists that had me going through like 5 emotions in 2 seconds. They were just that good. These books just read themselves, it is fast-paced, the writing is lyrical, atmospheric, with these dark fairy tale vibes, and the most perfect slow burn romance I've ever read. Based on how much I adore the first 2 books, my expectations for Acres for True Love are rather realistic, you know. I just expect it to be my favorite book of all times. One Dark Window was a super impulsive ebook purchase when it was on sale for €1, and I remembered hearing about it in Gothic romance book recommendations. First of all, the cover is absolutely gorgeous. I feel like it really sets the mood with the greenish, smoky tint, the ornate frame details on the corners, and of course the red figure in the middle that pulls the eye in. Even if I haven't heard about it, from the cover alone, this would be something I would pick up at the bookstore out of curiosity. It is often mentioned in the same category as Belladonna, given the Gothic setting, the romance subplot, and the immortal being as one of the characters. In One Dark Window, we follow Elspeth, who has an ancient spirit trapped in her head named Nightmare. But nothing comes for free, especially magic. When Elspeth meets a mysterious highwayman on the forest road, she is thrust into a world of shadow and deception. Together, they embark on a dangerous quest to cure the town of Blunder from the dark magic infecting it. As the stakes heighten and their undeniable attraction intensifies, Elspeth is forced to face her darkest secret yet. The nightmare is slowly, darkly taking over her mind, and she might not be able to stop him. So the points that really spoke to me were the dark magic plot, the forest setting, and of course the ominous description of the spirit slowly taking over her mind. As far as I understand, it is young adult while leaning into the horror genre, so consider me intrigued. I'm pretty sure I will get to this book rather quickly in the upcoming weeks. The sequel, Two Twisted Crowns, is set to be published in October, so that could work out really well. I can immediately pick up the second part of the series. I mentioned The Master and Margarita in my little book shopping haul video, but ever since I looked deeper into the plot, so I can come to you with much more collected thoughts. It is one of the classics of Russian literature, depicting life in the 1930s in a surrealistic and satirical way. First, it was published in the 1960s after the author's Bulgakov's death in a censored edition, and now this edition is the full translation, I believe. I read this book back in my last year of high school in 2015 when we were learning about magical realism as a genre, but in the Hungarian translation, so I'm curious how the English translation will work for me. Nothing in the whole of literature compares with The Master and Margarita. One spring afternoon, the devil, trailing fire and chaos in his wake, weaves himself out of the shadows and into Moscow. Mikhail Bulgakov's fantastical, funny and devastating satire of Soviet life combines two distinct yet interwoven parts, one set in contemporary Moscow, the other in ancient Jerusalem, each brimming with historical, imaginary, frightful and wonderful characters. Written during the darkest days of Stalin's reign and finally published in 1966 and 1967, The Master and Margarita became a literary phenomenon. I find it funny how you have like a bunch of basically like review sentences, and then you have like the New York Times book review, and then Newsweek, and then randomly you have like Daniel Radcliffe saying, "My favorite novel is just the greatest explosion of imagination, craziness, satire, humor and heart." I think I talked about it in a previous video. I always find it funny when you have these sort of like celebrity endorsements as part of like the book review section. I don't know, it always just makes me like stop for a second and think like, why is his opinion considered a deciding factor for me to purchase a book? Food for thought. Another book where the autumn vibes are just immaculate on the cover is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride. However, I've also heard that the cover can be misleading because it looks like a YA Gothic fantasy story when in reality much of the focus of the book is the obsessive friendship between Indigo and her childhood best friend Azur. Combining the lush, haunting atmosphere of Mexican Gothic with the dreamy enchantment of the invisible life of Eddie LaRue, The Last Tale of the Flower Bride is the spellbinding adult debut from New York Times bestselling author Roshani Chokshi. It is a darkly romantic page-turner about love and lies, secrets and betrayal, and the stories we tell ourselves to survive. So it is the author's Roshani Chokshi's adult debut. You might be familiar with her work in the YA genre, the Gilded Wolves trilogy or the Star Touch Queen series. I actually own the first book, The Gilded Wolves, but I haven't read it yet. Oops. Many people praise her writing for setting the ambience quite well, so I have high hopes for this book based on the gothic vibes of the cover. Talking about books where the emphasis might be on the ambience rather than containing a complex plot, I'm sure I don't have to introduce Erin Morgenstern as an author to you. As I was looking at my shelves choosing the books for this autumn TBR, I realized that I know a lot about the general plot of The Night Circus, but not so much about the Starless Sea. If anything, I've heard people like to go into it almost completely blind to be taken on an adventure, so I guess I will be doing that too. The Night Circus, as the title suggests, is a rather magical and whimsical read where two rival magicians battle on the stage but can't help and develop feelings for each other. That sounds exactly something like I would immensely enjoy, so I'm looking forward to getting to it. As I said, the Starless Sea is seemingly a lot less straightforward when it comes to the plot. From what I can remember, it is a story within a story as the main character Zachary discovers a book and goes on an adventure in a secret underground world. It's really cool because even the blurb on the back doesn't really give it away. It just says, when Zachary Revlin stumbles across a mysterious library book containing details from his own life amongst its pages, it leads him on a quest unlike any other. Following the clues inside, he is guided to a masquerade party, a dangerous secret club, and finally to a labyrinth filled with stories hidden far beneath the surface of the earth. But when the labyrinth is threatened, Zachary must race through its twisting tunnels and crowded ballrooms, searching for the end of his story. So I'm so ready to go on an adventure with the Starless Sea. Honestly, both of these books sound like the perfect picks to dive into when the weather outside is gloomy and grey, so of course they are part of my autumn TBR. One of the booktubers I discovered recently is Lexi, and she mentioned this book in her fall TBR saying, "Am I the only person in the universe that hasn't read this book?" Don't worry, I haven't read it either. My sister has read it, my sister's boyfriend has read it, and they both sang the praises, and yet this book has been sitting on my shelf, unread. Tragic. But finally this might be the season when I dip my toes into the dark academia craze and read this piece of fiction. Not gonna lie, with more than 600 pages, it is a bit of a chunky one, so I need to be in the right headspace for it, I feel like. The moment I was sold on it when someone said it has an academic setting, pretentious eccentric characters, and there's a murder and a lot of questions on morality. I was actually surprised to learn that this was first published in 1992 and it was a bestseller basically from the get-go. I thought it became popular later on with the rise of dark academia, but apparently that wasn't the case. Am I planning a dark academia reading vlog like everyone else on BookTube currently? Maybe. Please leave your dark academia recommendations in the comments below, because I think I'm only familiar with like the more popular ones, and I think I have some hidden gem dark academia books on my list, but I would be interested if you know any good dark academia books. Going back to fantasy, I have two works from Reid on my autumn TBR. The first one is The Wolf and the Woodsman. Not gonna lie, I mainly picked it up because it is said to be inspired by Hungarian history and mythology, and I'm Hungarian, so I was excited to read it and discover all the hidden details. The cover is very much reminiscent of Hungarian like folktale illustrations, which I find super cool, and the colors are definitely very autumny, but also a little bit eerie. The plot takes place in the woods, as the title implies, in a village where Evika is the only woman without power, making her an outcast clearly abandoned by the gods. The villagers blame her corrupted bloodline. Her father was a Yehuliman, one of the much-lauded servants of the fanatical king. When soldiers arrive from the Holy Order of Woodsman to claim a pagan girl for the king's blood sacrifice, Evika is betrayed by her fellow villagers and surrendered. But when monsters attack the woodsman and their captive en route, slaughtering everyone but Evika and the cold one-eyed captain, two have no choice but to rely on each other. Except the captain is no ordinary woodsman. He is the disgraced prince Baran Gaspar, whose father needs pageant magic to consolidate his power. I'm sorry, but the names make me laugh so much. Like the woman's name, Evika, it's a very, like, almost childish nickname of the name Eva. Like, I knew in high school there was a little girl who was like, I think 5th grade when we were in like 10th grade. And her name was Evika, because Ka at the end of the names, it's a very, how do you say it? It implies like little, or it's like a diminutive. I think that's the right word. And then apparently the main character is called Baran Gaspar, which is first of all super Hungarian. Baran means lamb, and it's a rather common family name. I have a friend with this family name, so I couldn't help but picture him. And Gaspar is a very old-fashioned man's name in Hungary. I will look it up what it means and I will put it somewhere in the screen, but basically it just made me chuckle because the names are super like old-fashioned, and I don't know, as a Hungarian speaker they're not super magical, but I can imagine if you read this and you don't speak Hungarian, because of the accents on the characters and because of the unusual sound, they must sound like super mythological or super like fantastical to you, but to me they just made me chuckle. So let's see, I'm planning to do a very thorough review of The Wolf and the Woodsman by Reid. The other Reid book is the one that is set to be published in September, A Study in Drowning. It is a YA work, gothic fantasy with a hint of romance. I think you can see the theme here. We have two rival students, some dark magic, and fairy tales as a backdrop. The description on Storygraph is rather short, but it basically reads: when architecture student Effie Sarah wins a contest to design her favorite author's family manor, she finds herself on a remote, crumbling estate filled with disturbing secrets. With the help of a rival student, Effie must unravel a decades-old mystery, but there are dark forces, both mortal and magical, conspiring against them, and the truth may bring them both to ruin. So that sounds super exciting. So I am looking to get my hands on this. I think in Austria it might release a little bit later. Yeah, it is set to be published on the 19th of September here in Austria, so fingers crossed that I can get my hands on a copy. So this autumn TBR could also be called me selecting all the books in my collection where the cover screams autumn, because oh my god, the binding has a stunning cover. I love the ornate gold detailing and the deep blue colors on this. It's so pretty. I actually started reading this book last year, I believe, and I got to like 20 pages, but then I wasn't really feeling it and ended up reading something else. However, I'm willing to give it another try this year. In the binding, we are in a world where books are considered dangerous and people visit bookbinders only to record their painful memories in the pages of a book and then wipe their minds. We follow Emmett, who is our main character, who suffers some sort of accident that leaves him unable to work on his family's farm, and he goes to be an apprentice to a bookbinder. And that basically kicks off the whole plot. Emmett Farmer is a binder's apprentice. His job is to handcraft beautiful books and within each to capture something unique and extraordinary, a memory. If you have something you want to forget or a secret to hide, he can bind it, and you will never have to remember the pain it caused. In a vault under his mentor's workshop, row upon row of books and secrets are meticulously stored and recorded. Then one day, Emmett makes an astonishing discovery. One of the volumes has his name on it. I love when the blurbs kind of leave you with like more questions about a book than answers. So I will be picking up this book for sure during the fall months. So if you need me over the next couple of months, I will be on the couch reading fantasy and dark academia books. I'm curious though, what is on your fall TBR? Let me know in the comments below and see you in my next video. Take care!